And we're going to turn it over to Ben to share with us how we should be thinking about live events and how he gets prepared. And then we'll open it up to questions and get people to uh, interact and figure out like how we can maybe help their specific situation.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much, Joe. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to talk about this topic. There are not many things in this world that I would consider myself an expert at, but this is one of those precious few things. So, again, thank you for the opportunity. I'm Ben Wolf. I just got back from a live event yesterday. If you were already on the call when Joe and I were talking about that, then you kind of heard a little bit of the detail about that. Wasn't my best show ever, but I still made money. And at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. We made some money, made some connections with some fans, and had a good time doing it. I'm scheduled to do over 50 shows this year, including RAVE. And that may seem like a lot, and it is a lot, but when you're like me and you can't sell books online, you don't really have much of a choice. So, with that said, I have jumped headfirst into doing live events, and I've really been enjoying it for the last several years. It's a lot of work, but show me a part of publishing that isn't a lot of work, right? And so, if you look at it from that perspective, it being a lot of work isn't necessarily something that you need to be afraid of. And so, with that by way of introduction, I'm just going to go ahead and jump in. I mentioned initially when we were filling out the information and coming up with a tagline or a brief description for this webinar of what we would be covering. And it's really three key areas that we're going to discuss as it pertains to RAVE specifically. Obviously, these three areas are going to have application for other shows as well, but I'm going to try to be a little bit more specific to the RAVE show since that's what we're on the call for. And if you're on this call, there's a good chance you're probably a RAVE author or you're involved in the planning of the event itself. Either way, hopefully you're going to learn a lot. And like Joe said, I'll be happy to take questions at the end. And feel free at any point to dump them into the chat feature on our webinar here. I won't read them till the end, but put them in right away so that you don't forget. Okay, so those three areas. First, at the first and longest section, we're going to talk about some basic sales tactics. These are ideas and concepts that I've employed over all the various shows that I've done. I've done probably around 150 shows at this point in the last several years. Gone almost every weekend doing these events, but making good money doing it and moving a lot of books. So we'll start with sales tactics and how I've done what I've been able to do and how you can do it too. The second section is sourcing great display elements. And that's a really interesting and cool topic that we can discuss because when it comes to a live event, especially RAVE, where you're in a room with hundreds of other authors and everybody is vying for the same set of readers' attention, you need to find a way to stand out. And so we'll talk about a couple of options that are affordable and manageable, both if you're driving in or if you're flying in. I've got some good options for you to consider for either path you're going to take to get to Vegas. And then at the very, very end, we're going to talk about how to capture readers' attention without seeming desperate or creepy. And that's super important because, as Joe mentioned, we're in this business, especially now, to make and build relationships with these readers. Anyone can sell a book to someone. Anyone can run an ad, well, aside from me, apparently, can sell books online, right? That's great. But if you really want staying power with the readers that you're going to interact with, then you actually need to interact with them in a way that is memorable, that honors their commitment to you and them being willing to purchase your book, and that sows seeds for something in the future. And so we'll talk about just a couple of actually pretty relatively easy strategies on how you can capture their attention as well as capture their information. So without further ado, we'll jump in with sales tactics. First thing I want to point out is that yes, you want to sell books, right? That's why we're going to Rave. That's a big part of the event. We're there to sell books. Readers are coming to buy books. The readers aren't necessarily thinking, oh, I'm going to walk away with 2 bags full of books and a bunch of new friends. But as authors, we kind of want that to happen. We want to sell books, but we also want to forge potentially lasting relationships and connections with these readers. And you may be thinking to yourself, how can I do that? Like, if I'm going to sell 20 books, am I really going to be expected to remember the name and personal details of all 20 people who I sold those books to? Not necessarily. No, I don't think you need to. I think that when something like that happens, when you sell one book to one person, that's great. When they keep coming back year after year and you start to recognize them, that's when you want to go a little bit deeper. So don't get too alarmed by what I just said about wanting to sell a lot of books and trying to remember everybody's names. You just don't have to do that. The main thing is you want to create an experience that is memorable and fun for them. If you do that, then they'll remember you, and that's the more important part of the equation. So, in terms of starting out with your tactics, it all starts with your attitude or your mentality. Think about, what is your goal? Are you there solely to sell books? Or are you there to make connections with readers and eventually turn them into fans? I think we can all agree the ideal answer is both of those things. And so I wrote a book called Power Author, a quick guide to mastering live events. It's on Amazon. It's on my website. That's the only time I'm going to throw that out there, because that's not the point of this webinar. I go into a bunch more about sales tactics and all of this stuff in the book. If you want to go deeper with it, grab the book. Otherwise, what I can tell you now is the most important thing that you can do with fellow book nerds is to bond over books. It just so happens that the books you're bonding over are the ones that are sitting on your author table. If you're worried about coming on too strong, keeping in mind that you just want to bond over books, that's a good reminder that you're just there to geek out with fellow book nerds. If you're on the other side of the spectrum and you're worried that you won't sell anything, same thing applies. Just focus on sharing what you love about your own books with your fellow book nerds. And then also remember that, yes, you're there to connect, but also those readers are there to shop. So it's okay if you come across as a little bit salesy. For the most part, you just want to have a good time chatting with these readers, these prospective buyers, about your books and what inspired you to write them the way that you wrote them. Now, practically speaking, once we've sort of got the right mindset in place, what I advocate in my book and what I actually do every time I do a show is I have a repeatable sales process that I follow. And this may run counterintuitive to some of us creative types, because we think, oh no, everyone's different. We need to approach them differently. Sure, to an extent, but there's also a lot to be said for having a structure. There's also a lot to be said for having a repeatable process that works. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? And so as part of that sales process, I've got 3 areas that we'll discuss. And the first one is, someone comes up, so we're in our scenario here. Someone comes up to your table, they're kind of perusing your books. That's a good sign, because if they're looking intently at your table or at your books, that's how you know, okay, it's time to engage. It's time to start the sales process. Number 1, you start by asking open-ended questions. Some examples of that. What types of books do you like to read? This is something that I ask readers who approach my table at shows week after week, month after month, year after year. And it works because you're inviting them into a conversation where they get to talk about themselves. You're not immediately saying, hey, here, I'm an author, here are my books. That is more likely to turn them off, as opposed to you investing one sentence, the time it takes to ask one sentence, you making that little investment in them gets them to open up to you, and then you can use the information that they provide you to direct them to whichever of your books seems like it would be the best fit. So some offshoots of that, that first question, what types of books do you like to read? You can ask for specific genres or titles or authors. And hopefully you've heard of the genres, titles, and authors they put out, they share with you. If not, then ask for clarification. You can almost never ask too many questions throughout this process, and that's something that I think is a good takeaway for everybody. Just take note of that in your heads, or if you're writing this down, definitely write that down. You cannot ask too many questions, generally speaking. And then the next thing I would ask would be, ask what about those specific books captivated the reader? What did you like about those books? That's an easy way to phrase it. If you see them really scrutinizing a section of your books or maybe a particular series, a really good open-ended question to ask is, what caught your eye over here? And again, that works best if they're actually looking at your table. You don't want to just shout that at someone who's kind of walking past. It doesn't work so well. Another question that my wife scores pretty big with this one. Oh, and here we go with the thunderstorm alarm. I apologize. Let me try and turn off the sound here. Here, I'll just throw it over there. Okay, good. Back to the chat. If I die, I love you all. All right, here we go. So I was talking about my wife scores big with this question whenever we do shows. She's an author as well. She likes to ask, who is the big reader in your family? Now, at RAVE, of course, generally the people we're going to be talking to, the very person who's looking at your books is probably going to be that avid reader in question. But at other shows, maybe you get a grandmother, or maybe you get a dad and their grandson, granddaughter, or son or daughter, or their niece and nephew, or whatever. Maybe they're not the primary reader, but maybe they know someone, or they have someone in their family who's an avid reader, and they're doing some birthday shopping. You see this especially around the holidays too. People are looking for gifts. And with Rave being in November, we are pretty darn close to holiday season. So it's okay to have that in mind as a question to ask, since chances are these readers will be looking for themselves, but possibly also other people in their families. So that's number one, start by asking open-ended questions. Number two, once you have some good info, pair them with whichever books they seem to be a good fit with. And so for each of your books and your series, you obviously need to know your elevator pitch inside and out. When I first started doing writers' conferences, a lot of the teaching was, and by doing, I mean attending. I attended my first writer conference all the way back in 2009, almost 15 years ago at this point. And there was a huge emphasis on making sure that you knew your elevator pitch for whatever book or books you were pitching, because that's what the agent or the publisher you would be meeting with would expect to hear. And so we would workshop it and tweak it and mess with it and all that fun stuff. And now, back then it was a really stressful thing for me, but now it's in every, not an everyday occurrence, but an every weekend occurrence. I'm spouting my elevator pitches on the regular. I'm refining my elevator pitches based on how people respond. You don't necessarily have to do all that work to get your elevator pitch perfect, but it does need to be good. It does need to be clear. I go into a lot more detail on what the actual construction of a functional elevator pitch is in my live events book. So you can check that out there, but I'll give you a couple of hints right now. First thing I would say is, because we are humans in modern culture right now, we have access to a lot of media. And so I found that it's really, really useful to employ comparables. What I mean by that is, you say, here's my book. It's very similar to this other book, or this movie series, or this TV series. Or if you like books by author so-and-so, you will like this book because of this. You're making comparisons, and those comparisons create pathways in the reader's mind of, oh, well, I liked this, so therefore I will probably also like this. Or conversely, oh, well, I really didn't like that, and so this is not like that. Okay, then maybe I can give it a try. So a fake example that I came up with is, this is like Aliens meets Little House on the Prairie. If anyone out there has written that book, I'd love to read it, but you get the point, right? So I'm taking two well-known properties and combining them to give you a snapshot of what the particular book is like. Number two in this subsection here is use confidence. Talk about your books with grandiose language. It may seem like you're not being humble, but I can tell you that when you're at a live event, that is not the time to be humble. You want to be humble when you're winning an award. You want to be humble when you're working hard and trying to finish the book. You want to be humble at various other points, but when you're in front of people and you're trying to sell these books, you need to be confident and you don't have to be humble. They will sense your enthusiasm. They'll sense the emotion behind the words that you're saying to them if you are willing to say them in the first place. And so that's what I'm saying is you need to be willing to put some gusto behind your words in order to help better present your work to these readers. So this fantastic book is perfect for readers of sci-fi romance. I know you're going to love it. So I used superlatives there, excuse me. Fantastic and then perfect. And then I guess you could kind of say, I know you're going to love it. We're using big expressive language to convey the elements of your book. And that type of expressive language is really going to captivate the people you're talking to because people are predisposed to believe you when you say that stuff, especially when you're talking about something good and something they're already interested in. They're not going to be skeptical. Well, I don't think it's really that fantastic. Well, how would they know? They haven't read it. They've only seen the cover. They've only looked at it. They've only met you. If you tell them it's fantastic or great or amazing or wonderful or whatever other big, awesome word you want to use, psychologically speaking, they're more likely to believe you. At least in my experience, that has been the case. Doesn't mean you're going to make a sale right then and there, but this whole process is moving them deeper and deeper and deeper into the process and trying to get them to buy your book. And of course, you're still trying to bond over books too. It's just your books you're bonding over. And then the next one would be use physicality. When possible, I highly recommend standing. I know not everyone is able to stand for long periods, but if you can stand at least whenever a customer comes over, it sort of shows a sign of mutual respect. Like they came over to look at your books, that's them stepping out on a limb. For you to stand up and talk to them, that's you meeting them where they're at. And that's psychologically, I think, super important in terms of forging that bond with the reader. So stand up if you can. Smile, because if you don't smile, if you don't look like you're happy to be there, they're going to believe that you're not happy to be there. It's a small thing, but it really does make a big difference. And then this tip right here that I'm about to share with you is perhaps the most important part of the entire sales process. So pay attention. Hand the reader your book. Every time, hand your reader the book. Whichever book they're looking at, pick up a copy and literally hand it to them and hold it out until they take it. And if they aren't taking it, you can say, here you go, have a look. If they still don't take it after that, then you put it back. But otherwise, you got to hand it to them. There is a psychological transfer of ownership when you hand it to them because they're already thinking, do I need to buy this book? Is this something I can't live without? And for you to hand it to them, it accomplishes a lot of different things. Two of them being, it makes them think, oh, this book is already mine, very subconsciously in the back, in the primal part of their brain. That has already become their book. And then the second part is they can read your back cover, which is super important because it takes them even deeper into the story. And again, the sales process, it's like you're reeling in a fish, right? You just get them a little bit closer every time. So hand your readers your book. I cannot emphasize that enough. It is the most important part of the sales process. In my experience, that and book covers, having a really great book cover, which we'll get into in a little bit, those are the two most important parts. And then once you've done all these things, number 3 under this sales tactics part, and we're going to wrap that up and jump into displays after this. Number 3 is close the sale. Now, there are a lot of techniques for this. Some of them are sharky and awful. Some of them are pushy and rude. Some of them are none of those things and can still be very effective. My favorite one is to assume the sale. You can assume the sale, and it's exactly what it sounds like. You tell them that they're going to buy it essentially, but you don't say it directly because you chances are maybe you're from the Midwest like me and you don't want to do it directly because that would be offensive. So, assuming the sale looks something like this, you say, "So, which books can I send home with you today?" Or, "Of course, I'm happy to sign and personalize anything that you purchase today." That one I use a lot because it reinforces the fact that you yourself are the author and that this is a unique opportunity for them to get a signed and personalized book and potentially even a photo op with the author right then and there. You can go for the payment method. We accept cash, credit, Venmo, PayPal, gold bullion, and firstborn children as methods of payment, or whatever you accept. Another one is, can I send the full series home with you today? That one is tempting because it implies an upsell as well, especially if you've got a series. Upselling is great. I won't get into upselling too terribly much, but suffice it to say, if you feel like you can upsell them, you should at least try for it. And then this one is also kind of an implied upsell. Do you prefer the omnibus version or do you want the individuals? And in my book, I talk about how omnibuses are absolutely amazing. An omnibus, of course, is your entire series in one big book. I sell way more omnibuses than I do of anything else. That's just how the cookie crumbles. People see a big, thick book with 3 or 4 fantasy books inside it, and they think challenge accepted, and then they buy that thing. So if you have a complete series, this is a side note, consider formatting and printing an omnibus version because you're going to make way more money off of those from a certain type of reader. One last note about the sales process. Remember that pricing is just a part of the process. It is not usually a selling point unless they're doing something that's going to earn them a discount in your estimation, like they're buying multiple books or pretty much that's it, or maybe you're feeling generous and want to give them a discount. The price is the price, and that's just kind of how it is, right? If you want to incentivize them to buy more, find another way to do it. Try not to use price as an incentive because chances are they were going to buy at whatever price if you've done all this other stuff that I've mentioned before, chances are they're going to buy anyway. So you don't need to lower the price just to close the sale. I hope that makes sense to you. All right, so we talked a little bit about sales tactics. That was the longest section. The next 2 sections will go much quicker. And again, I'm trying to be respectful of your time because I don't want to keep you here all night. And also, there may be a tornado heading straight for my house. Okay. Number 2, we're going to talk about sourcing great display elements. And this is super important because you can be the most personable guy or gal or other in the world, but that doesn't necessarily matter if your display looks like hot garbage. You don't want to look bad. You want to have a professional and eye-catching display. Now, in terms of RAVE, it's in Las Vegas. A lot of us are flying in, myself included. So we're limited on what we can bring. Can I bring my gigantic banner down? I can, yes, because I have a friend who's driving down and it's going to go with him. Can you all bring your gigantic banner down if you have one? The answer is maybe, right? So we have to keep some of these things in mind as we're looking at RAVE specifically. But generally speaking, that's not where we're going to start. We're not going to start with RAVE because that's the end of the road. We're going to start closer to the beginning. I mentioned earlier that book covers are so, so, so important. They are absolutely crucial in every single element of your visual display when you're at a live event. First of all, they're on the books themselves, right? They are literally the first thing that your reader is going to see when they're looking at the books themselves. You see the book cover, everybody says, don't judge a book by its cover, but guess what? That's what happens anyway. My advice to you is make sure that your book covers are beyond reproach. They need to be absolutely phenomenal, amazing, eye-catching, colorful, evocative. They need to suggest very strongly the genre of book that your book actually is. If they don't achieve those things, then, well, we've got 3 months until October, and October is about when you'd want to start thinking about ordering books for RAVE. So I would say get on it and start making changes if you feel you need to make some. Readers absolutely stop at my booth because my book covers are awesome, and they buy the books in part because the book covers are awesome too. In terms of your book cover, you're going to take your book cover assets, the art and the text layout. You're going to use a lot of that. The way your author name is displayed, you're going to use a lot of that to create your various display elements. I've got a big banner. You can find all this. You can find tons of pictures of this on my Facebook profile, for example. I've got a big banner behind me at all times whenever I'm doing a show. And it says, author book signing today, meet the legend Ben Wolf, right? And I'm not a legend, but who they don't know any better. The people walking past, they might think I'm a big deal. Great. So again, live events are not the time to be humble. So I'm just going all out. But the text is great. The text is evocative and it makes people think, oh, is he a legend? Cool, whatever. That's not what really is pulling them over. What's pulling them over is the incredible design of the actual banner itself. That and the scale, the sheer size of the banner. Usually my banner is about an 8 foot by 8 foot banner hung on a banner stand and very eye-catching because I have great cover artists and I pay good money to have them create fantastic cover art. And then, of course, I get their permission to repurpose that art for my banners. And so if you've got great art, you can use it for your banners. You can use it for table runners. You can use it for tablecloths. You can use it for little signs that are on your table for maybe for pricing or for anything else that you would want to display. The point is, if you have great book covers, then automatically, as long as you get permission from the artist or the designer, you automatically have everything you need to get great display stuff created as well. And so I want to go over a couple of budget options for you because not all of us can afford a big banner. Not all of us want to afford a big banner, right? And so some of us are going to be higher budget, some of us are going to be lower budget. So on the higher budget side, I'll give you some examples. And then on the lower budget side, we'll talk about some of those as well. On the high budget side, obviously, we've got the banner and the backdrop. If it's important to you to make a big splash and to really stand out at RAVE or at any other live event, go big or go home. That's my stance on it, and it's worked well for me so far. You can get a custom banner or a custom backdrop from a variety of places. The website where I've had the most success is 4over.com, and that's the number 4 and then over, like over there, 4over.com. You have to apply for an account because technically they are they market wholesale prices to resellers so that you can resell it to other people. When I applied for my account there, I told them I was a publisher, which is true. And it was even more true back then because I was doing other publishing things aside from just working on my own stuff. And they let me in. And since then, I've purchased most of my display stuff from there with only a few exceptions. You can get a big banner or you can get a more budget friendly option. You can get like a tabletop sign, one of those roll up pull things. And then you put the little rod in the back and it hooks on and then boom, it displays very nicely. If you're flying to Vegas, that might be the better option and is certainly the cheaper option. I was looking at 4Over's website today, and the biggest one of those they have is somewhere around a 9 by 12 inch pull-up display, and it cost $33 and change before shipping. 33 bucks, not terribly expensive compared to the cost of a banner and a banner stand. You're looking at roughly 180, I think, give or take, depending on what stand you buy on Amazon, maybe 200 on the high end. So it depends on what is closer and what fits better into your budget. And then logistically, which is easier for you to get to Las Vegas or to whichever other show you're going to. Another option for you is, do you want to get a custom tablecloth or do you want to get just a table runner? Obviously, a tablecloth is going to cover the whole table. It's going to drape over the sides. I've got one of those and it's fantastic. I use it every show, unless I'm doing an outdoor show because I don't want it to get ruined, but I don't do a lot of outdoor shows as it is. I use that one because it's branded specifically for one of my series, my best-selling series, in fact. It's got dragon scales all over it. It's a very, very cool color scheme, and it has my book covers on it as well. that costs a little bit more. That was a couple $100 for that. On the lower budget side, you don't necessarily need to bring an entire tablecloth with you to rave, especially if packing is tight and you don't want to have to pay overage charges with the airline or have to bring extra bags that maybe they would charge you for. Maybe consider doing a table runner instead. And again, you can get this on 4over, and I'm not getting any kickbacks or anything for recommending them. I just really love using them. They do great work. A table runner costs way less. It's like I want to say between 35 and $45 for a table runner, and you can get it varying widths. I think it goes from between 2 and 3 feet, if I'm not mistaken, and possibly even larger than that. A table runner is a great way to reduce the cost, but still have some of that awesome branding there. In terms of displaying your books, if you've got a lot of books, how are you going to display all of them at your show? At this point, I've got 27 books out plus 5 omnibus versions for my different series, and a few other random things as well. Displaying all of those it can be a challenge at times because I don't always have enough table space. At certain shows, my space is smaller. It just kind of depends on the show and what kind of space they're able to give me. And so I have to get creative in how I display each of my books. And so what I've done is I've utilized bookshelves, I've used platforms, I've used additional tables if I bring my own. Some of those things may be within the realm of possibility for you in Vegas, and some may not. I don't think we are going to be allowed to bring extra tables, but what I would say is maybe if you can't build out, think about building up. If you've got a lot of books and if you can get a lot of books to Vegas for the event, maybe look into bringing some bookshelves with you, or they've got foldable stands that you can set up that are like almost like for cookbooks. I display the art for my children's book on a cookbook stand, and that really helps bring people over. There's all sorts of stuff out there. Troll Amazon, you'll find some stuff. I do have a list of all the different things that I use for live events in my Power Author book as well. Some of it's going to be high budget, some of it's going to be low budget. You just kind of have to figure out what will work best for you and try to conceptualize it in your head before you buy it. And then the last thing I would say is, in terms of capturing people's attention, you can use a clipboard if you want to be real low tech, or if you're set up to do it this way, you can have an iPad or a tablet or a laptop and get people to sign up by adding their email address right to that. We'll talk more about how to capture readers' attention and info in the next section. Real quick before we do that, I want to hit on a couple of considerations again for RAVE specifically. Are you driving or are you flying? You've got to make that decision. And once you've made it, that's going to affect what you can realistically bring with you in terms of display stuff. If you're driving, in theory, you can bring more display stuff. You'll want to make sure that the stuff that you're bringing will fit in the spot that is allotted to you. So if you're going to be sharing a table, then you want to make sure that you try to communicate with whoever you're sharing the table with, because maybe the two of you can kind of split the burden there and bring something that will be engaging without overwhelming one author or the other. Communicate with your table mate on that. If you have your own table, then it's kind of up to you what you want to do. Now, if you're flying, you do have to plan and pack carefully, and the aforementioned low budget options may be smarter for you. Another consideration is, are you planning to do other live events either before or after RAVE? If you are, then maybe you can justify spending on some of these things a little bit more because you'll get more use out of them. But if RAVE is pretty much the only event you're going to do this year and you're not planning to do other events next year, maybe don't go too overboard with the spending. You may just not need to do all that. Maybe you can do more with less. And then I mentioned this earlier as well, but how many books do you have published? Which of them are you bringing to the show? How many of each are you going to bring? Will they fit in your suitcase? Are you driving down? Will all the boxes that you want to bring fit in your vehicle? If you're flying out, will all those books fit in your suitcases for the return trip? Especially if you're like me and you want to buy books from other authors at the event. You have to account for space for those as well. So keep those things in mind. And I know Joe is going to give us a rundown of an option that will hopefully help with that, called the signing store. And it should make it a little bit easier for authors to get books to and from. And then the last section here, and we're doing pretty well on time, capturing readers' attention and info without seeming desperate or creepy. This section is super simple. We'll be through this in about 5 minutes, maybe even less. It all boils down to this. There are a few things, 4 things that I would say you want to keep in mind when you're trying to capture a reader's attention or capture their info. And here they are. The first one is, don't give anything away to anybody. If someone is just randomly passing by, this is a mistake I made early on in doing these live events, and I've seen other authors make this mistake as well. You just want, we're all desperate. We want people to read our books. And so, hey, would you like a free short story? And you hand them a postcard where they can download a free short story. That's great. Sure, fine, whatever. They'll take it. Maybe they'll throw it away. Maybe they won't. If you do that, they're definitely not going to buy anything from you. I would say 95% of the time, because you've already given them something to read, and it works against you. So don't give anything away to anyone unless they've already made a purchase. None of that's going to encourage them to buy your book right then and there. And that's the goal of RAVE and other shows. And so everything that we've discussed so far, it's geared toward getting them to make that purchase right here, right in that moment. Next one is, only collect info from people you've actually sold a book to. The reason for this is that they're a pre-qualified lead, as opposed to some rando who you connived into getting them to subscribe to your mailing list. They're more likely to unsubscribe as quickly as they subscribe. But if they've already purchased from you, then they're already invested in your career and in your stories. And so it makes sense to try to get them onto your newsletter. You're more likely to have better conversion on your mailing list efforts or your social media efforts if you want to have them follow you on a certain platform or whatever. Instead, you're going to have better results from people who already have given you money for something that you've created. Number 3, it's always an offer or a bonus if they sign up. And what I mean by that is, yes, absolutely give them a freebie. If you can give them a free ebook download or an extra little tchotchke or a magnet or something for signing up, something to incentivize them to sign up, to further incentivize them to sign up. Because if you've done your job and if you've bonded over books and you've sold them something, chances are they're going to want to sign up anyway. In my experience, man, the percentage is super, super high of people who sign up for my newsletter after they've made a purchase. It is very rare, maybe once every 3 or 4 shows. And again, I'm doing 50 shows a year. Maybe once every 3 or 4 shows, someone will be like, no, I don't think I'm interested in signing up. The vast majority of people who I sell books to have jumped onto my newsletter because I offer. And so when it's an offer or when it's a bonus, some phrases that you can use, you can offer to include them on your author journey. It's a little bit goofy sounding and it's a little bit cliche almost, but honestly, I think it works. We have opportunities to influence people and to let them live vicariously through us. And so that's kind of a good way to phrase it without coming across like you're a jerk or a weirdo. Another simpler way of saying that is you can offer to stay connected. If you want to stay connected with me, here, jump on my author newsletter. Another thing you could say would be, if you jump on my author newsletter, then I can let you know when I'm coming back to town for another show, when I have new releases or when I have other exciting news. Stuff like that, stuff that implies that you're going to be communicating with them on a regular basis. It works much better, of course, if they've already made a purchase with you or if they've expressed a lot of interest in what you're doing. Great. That's perfect. That's what you want. And then the last one I would say is be ready to capture all their information right away. I mentioned you can go with a clipboard, you can go with an iPad or a laptop or whatever. If you don't have the capability to immediately sign them up for your newsletter or direct them to a social media platform where you want them to follow you, I would say just have a clipboard, have them write down their email, and it sucks, but you can manually add in that information to your newsletter client later on. If you're a little bit more tech savvy, or even if you're not that tech savvy, because most of them have tutorial videos on how to do this, mail clients like MailChimp and MailerLite and some of the others have integrations that can enable you to sign people up right then and there if you've got an internet connection and if you've got a website where you can stage that. So look into that as well if you can. It's super effective in terms of actually getting people onto your newsletter. And again, these are pre-qualified leads. These are people who've already invested in you. These are people with whom you've already bonded over books. And so with that, we've gone over the 3 different areas. We talked about sales tactics in a lot of different ways on how you can engage people and get them to come over to your booth and hopefully bond over books and get them to purchase from you. We talked about how you can use your cover art to get great display elements and what some options, both for Rave and for other shows, both for low budget and high budget would be. And then we just finished the section on capturing readers' attention without seeming desperate or creepy. So with that, Joe, we're either going to jump into questions or you can chat a little bit more about the signing store option. I suppose it's up to you.
Sure, sure. So anybody that has questions, you can either type them in the question space, or if you raise your hand, we'll bring you on and we can get your question. Um, while you folks are thinking about that, I will talk about the signing store. So some of the things that Ben talked about are a little different at Rave because of how we have designed some of our solutions. Our approach has been, when looking at any part of the show, really breaking it down and seeing how would we do it if we were starting and doing it the way we think it should be done. And Rave was a terrific opportunity because we have the situation where we're in Las Vegas, where a lot of people love to come to. It's pretty cheap to get there compared to other cities. There's a lot of reasons why people would come there. And there's also a lot of people there already. It's one of the fastest growing cities around, with a nearly 3 million people in the metro area. So we can get a lot of people to come to this show that are just there to be customers, right? Now, what we wanted to do is make that as easy as possible for all of you people that are traveling. So one of the big things that we've done is this signing store where you can upload your books, and you have 2 choices. One choice is you can be somebody like Ben, who has a bunch of inventory and he's got a system. And there's actually 3 ways. One thing Ben could do is he could just do how he always does it and come to the show and use his way that he collects purchasing and whatever his point of sale system is. And he doesn't have to change anything. All he has to do is, like he does at some other shows, is fill out a form with the sales tax he collects and remit it to us, and then we pay that. The second thing is um, he can take the books that he has and he can upload them into the store as products and put some inventory in there. So he's not loading any files. He's just loading the pictures and the blurb. And he uses our store as his point of sale system for before the show and after. And the third thing you can do is you can load up interior and exterior files for all your books. They're up there as products with all your information. And then when those books are pre-ordered by customers, or you choose to order inventory, we will get those books printed and delivered to the show. So we take out that big component of, like, how do I get all these boxes to the show? Do I have to bring a steamer case and pay a bunch of money to get it to the show? All the stuff that has been an obstacle financially and just effort wise, we're taking that out. The second piece is getting stuff out. Now, this helps you guys as well, but the real reason why we're having a FedEx station in the show is because we want our readers that come there to feel like they don't have to worry about how many books they buy, right? This is kind of the old thing that they do at Disney World, right? Is like you're walking around, they dump you out of the ride right into the store, and they sell you all kinds of stuff that's related to that ride. And then what do they say? Are you staying here at the resort? I am. Well, we could just have this brought to your room, right? So you forget all the stuff you buy. You end up buying more stuff, and then when you get back to your room, like, oh, this is cool. Or they'll send it right to your house, whatever it might be. The idea is how can we um, reduce the amount of effort for readers on the side that would get them into a position where they would buy less books. So what I'm going to do now, if we got more questions about this, I'll get to them, but we have a few more questions that are up here. So let me get to these and walk through them. First one is Ben. What are some good Midwestern phrases to get them more interested in buying the paperback instead of reading our books on KU? Or is it better to let them do KU so that they are more likely to read all of your books instead of just one?
This is a great question, and it is something that I run up against all the time because I get readers who prefer print, I get readers who prefer ebook and KU, and I get readers who prefer audio. And so I like to have an answer for each of them. What I would say is if they tell you that they're primarily an ebook reader, then the first question I would ask if your books are in KU, I would ask, do you have Kindle Unlimited? If they say yes, then you say, you should definitely check out my books on Kindle Unlimited. What I'm working on now, which I haven't finished it yet, I meant to have it finished for my last show this past weekend, but I just ran out of time, is I'm going to create a little booklet of QR codes because I've recently took all my stuff out of KU with only a couple exceptions, but I'm going to have that booklet include QR codes that will take them directly to my website. And so I can just flip, hold it up and say, here, get your phone out and scan this, because then it becomes hopefully more of an instant sale. The idea being here, you can buy this right now. And so that would be the strategy that I would employ in that particular circumstance. The only other thing I would say is, hey, I know you're a KU reader, but if you're interested in getting if you're interested in the collectible side of things, I'd be happy to sign and personalize anything that you buy today. And sometimes that's enough to push them over the edge into buying an actual physical book, but sometimes they'll just be like, "No, I'll check it out on KU, or I'll buy the ebook later." So good luck with it. Um, try them out and maybe report back. Let me know what you find out when we see each other in Vegas. You're muted, Joe.
Take off the mute. The next two questions I can answer. So one is, um, will this be recorded? Yes, it is recorded, and we will be posting this out. Also, we'll be having a second session next month, and we'll be doing more of these things because understand what we're doing here as a community of authors. There's us helping you get ready for the live show, but there's also what we're going to be doing as a collaboration over the next 100 days to sell books. Like the most important thing about the signing store is that it allows us to leverage your sales time, right? Ben has given us an amazing amount of things to do when you're live, when people are walking up and down the aisles. But if you're going to have a successful, profitable show, we can't expect you to sell thousands of books in a day, but we could expect you to sell 2, 3, 4 books a day over 100 days. That's really reasonable. And if we do this in a way where we are collaborating in our marketing, where we're doing email blasts about the store, we're doing things that Author Nation has planned around our marketing effort, where we're going to be doing paid advertising for the signing store to bring people in. We are promoting book sales with the act of giving people a $25 discount on the tech ticket to get in. So like they buy $100 of books, they get into the show for free, right? We want to get people to buy from you, right? That's the whole idea of this thing. So that'll be some of the fun stuff we'll also be talking about in future webinars and in the emails that we're sending you. So keep an eye on that. So the next question is from David. what are the measurements of tables and half tables, and how would you guess estimate the number of copies to have printed or bring? So I'm going to take the first part because I have that information. The tables are 8 foot by 2 foot. So if you're sharing that, it's going to be 4 foot by 2 foot. Um, there, if you, in some cases, it might be a little tight squeeze if you're on a corner, but like that's going to be how the tables are. Ben, you want to um, help people think about how you decide on your inventory?
For me, it's a different calculus because I've got a different set of circumstances. I've reserved a big end spot with Rave, and so I have more space than a lot of the other authors. And there are going to be some other heavy hitters at the event as well who are going to have more space, and so therefore they will bring more books. I also mentioned that I've got a friend who's driving down. He's driving down from northern Wisconsin, stopping at my place in Iowa, picking up my display stuff and my books and a few other things, and then driving them down to Vegas. He's crazy. Before you ask, yes, he is crazy. He just enjoys road trips, and so he has decided that he prefers to do a road trip down to Vegas. And he's an author as well, so he'll bring his books also, and they'll be displayed on my table as part of the way that I will say thank you to him. So because I have these things going for me, I'm bringing lots of books. For an author who's got a full table or even just a half table, you really want to think about what am I likely to sell? And Joe mentioned the signing store as a great resource to kind of guess at, I shouldn't say guess, maybe forecast what you're going to sell, because if you can pre-sale books through the signing store, that's going to make it a lot easier for you to calculate exactly what you should bring. Or they can just order the books directly through the signing store if you decide you want to set it up that way. Those can be really nifty and useful shortcuts to help you answer that question. But apart from those, what I would say is you need to factor in a couple of different things. You need to think about, am I driving or am I flying? Because right then and there, if you're flying, you're going to have some limits. If you're with Southwest or if you've got a credit card with one of the airlines and they let you bring extra bags, okay, maybe you're in business. Maybe you can sneak a few more books in. But generally speaking, if you write in series, you want to lean more heavily on book one and fewer of books two, three, and so on. And it's a cascading effect. They're less likely to buy book three than they are to buy book two, less likely to buy book two than they are to buy book one, so on and so forth. The exception to that is if you do create an omnibus version, like I mentioned, and again, omnibuses sell incredibly, incredibly well for me, tens of thousands of dollars this year in omnibuses alone. I highly recommend bringing roughly as many omnibuses as you do book ones, maybe slightly fewer, especially if you aren't used to selling the omnibus version yet. I would say if you're bringing 10 copies of book one, I'd bring 6 or 7 omnibuses at least, because again, there is a distinct audience who will, of reader who will just be like, I want that one. Give me the all-in-one because it's going to be a little bit cheaper and I turn the page and the next book is right there.
Mm.
Generally speaking, I would say figure out how much space you actually have to bring the books and to get them back to you if you're going to do it separate from the signing store. And then it's a cascading effect, more of book one than anything else. It also depends on how confident you feel in your sales ability and your ability to bond over books. If you feel like, hey, I'm personable, I'm an extrovert, or I have sales training, this is definitely something I can do. Bring a few extra books, man. Give it a shot. Do your best. If you're just not as confident, that's okay. This is a new experience for a lot of us, and we want it to be a fun experience as well. Bring fewer books so that it's not as cumbersome, because then even if you bring fewer books, and you sell out, then you can tell everybody that you sold out. And that's awesome too. So there's no downside as long as you can look at it from an optimist point of view. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah.
If you want to ask any clarifying questions about that, feel
Well,
free
what
to
I
drop
would
them in the
say
comments.
is, um, one of the cool things with the signing store is I, this first year, we're all going to be a little bit in the dark. But as you're watching your sales over time, if you're seeing sales tick up, I mean, I would just say, well, maybe I should bring 5 or 10% of that of whatever books are selling
Yeah.
as an order, right? I can just place that order on the signing store as my own inventory. And what's interesting about how that works is that will be the inventory we use in the signing store when the show goes live, because we switch that over to be our point of sale system. So people will be able to, if they're standing at your table and maybe, you're signing some stuff, they can always get on their phone and order from their account during the show. So that's something I would keep in mind. Now, if you're, I wouldn't necessarily do this, but I know some people may just decide I'm only going to sell pre-order. And what happens at the show, if somebody comes and asks, I'll point them at my direct store or I'll do something there. And that's fine. Like we're all about you guys getting sales either through our store or pointing people at your store or to Amazon. We want you to sell books. Um, so next, Kelly asks, will we be extending the July 21st date? My cover needs to be corrected by my designer. So you're able to put stuff up on the signing store after the 21st. You can do that. You can put stuff up later if you want. What we're trying to get you is the most visibility as possible. So if you are not able to get it done before then, that's okay. But we will start marketing heavily August 1st. But as part of our advertising campaign, we're going to start warming up the page before the end of July. So this gets into a little kind of marketing wushu stuff for people that you may be interested in this. Last year, we already started marketing the RAVE show, even though Susan and I hadn't taken over the show and created Author Nation. Craig gave me the ability to do that for RAVE. So if you were there, you may have noticed there was more people at RAVE last year than there ever was, because we've got about 600 locals to show up. So we have a list that we built last year. It's not a very big one because we didn't have a lot of time, but we built a list. And already I've reached out to that list and said, hey, we're getting ready to tell you all about RAVE 2024. If you want to know more, click here and we'll put you on the list for this year. So we've had about an 18% conversion of people that are interested. And crazily enough, some of them somehow found the store and bought tickets. I don't know how, because we didn't mention it, but like we're already selling tickets for the event. So I'm telling you that because don't get hung up on this deadline in the sense of like, you can't be in the store. It's just, you're not going to get the visibility you may get if you're in there earlier, because one of the things that's going to happen is if you notice the store, it's kind of in this pristine state where there isn't any reviews, there isn't any real association. But once people start buying books and looking at books, it's going to build our algorithm and you're going to start seeing discoverability and also bots associating on our store. And that's going to be where the real magic starts happening. So here's a question for you, Ben.
Yeah.
Do you make your omnibus in paperback or hardcover?
Right now, because of the current printer that I work with, which happens to be real close to my house, I'm only doing paperbacks for pretty much everything. I have one children's book, a picture book that is hardcover, but everything else is paperback at this point. I'm exploring options for hardcovers, but the issue with live events and hardcovers is if you already have paperbacks, then anything that you bring in hardcover effectively doubles your inventory, and I'm already bringing 27 books. So I would want to be very judicious about what I do and don't bring. I could see maybe doing it for omnibuses, but so far most people haven't been too cut up about having the omnibuses in paperback, and it certainly hasn't been a barrier for and for people who are interested in buying the series. I've had, I think I can count them on one hand, the number of people who have said, "Oh, I only buy hardbacks," and of those handful of people, even then, a couple of them bought from me, even though I didn't have a hardback. So, for what it's worth, you can do either one. Hardbacks are obviously going to be heavier if you're flying, so just take that into account as well.
Mm, awesome. Well, unless we have some more questions, I think our work here is done.
Great. Thank
Ben,
you guys so
yeah,
much.
thanks so much for doing this. And, again, if you have more questions, feel free to, there's, a channel in the community where you can, for Rave and the signing store, go in there and just drop your questions in there. We'll get them answered. Um, this is about us determining our own future. This is about us taking uh, control of how we are going to connect with customers. And I think that, one of the big things where I was really nodding my head when Ben was talking is this idea of making customers for life, where you do start to recognize people at these shows. And I can speak for myself. If we went back 4 years ago and you said to me, where you're going to find new young readers is at live events buying physical books, I would have said, no way. This is not going to happen. Yet that is the trend.
Yep.
That is what's going on. So if you're in a genre, you're like, oh, my folks are getting old, then you need to be focusing on things like this. It's not just TikTok where there's young people. They're actually people coming to these kind of events because they want what they haven't had growing up. So somebody that's my age, we used to own physical products, right? We had milk crates full of record albums, and we owned part of our favorite artists' work. With the fact that everything's subscriptions now, people don't feel like they own things. And I think that this is a big driving force of where people can come and create community, and they can support the artists that they know are creating great work, and they can own a piece of it. Memorabilia is a big deal. We'll be in future years opening up what kind of products we can have on this, but we knew what we wanted to start with is physical products. And understand this, there's things you can do with physical products. You touched on a few items. If you want to do something like, hey, I'm going to have a special where you buy my book one and you get a magnet with it. Well, you can put that book on print on demand, where we print it and we deliver it to the show, right? And you can put up a picture of that book with the magnet that looks real cool and describe it. And then you'll know, if we sell 100 books through print on demand, bring 100 magnets, right? So there's ways that you can do stuff with physical product that expect to see some really creative stuff at the show. You know, I know your buddies with Sound Booth Theater and sound. I didn't even
Yep.
see that. Sound
Yep.
Booth
Great
has this
stuff.
super badass cassette tape
Yep.
USB. You got one? I don't know.
No, I don't have one nearby, but yes,
So
I
it looks
have
like a
many of them.
cassette
Yes.
tape, but a USB pops out of it
Yep.
and it has their anthology. That's going to be something they sell at the show.
Yep.
And what happens is the narrators will sign them,
Yep.
right? You can actually sign a digital product when you do stuff like this. I've I've got one. I was showing these guys, and of course, I'm not going to be able to find one now, but um, it's essentially a USB that looks like a credit card, and the thing pops out, and it looks like a book cover. And
Yeah.
you can order these things, and in fact, the one I got it from, you can even send them the files, and they come loaded with your files on it. But again, those are the kind of things where you could load like a book inventory you're going to bring and sell those to people, and you
Hmm.
can sign them. Right? So,
Yep.
like, have fun with this. All right. That was a long ending. Again, thank you. We'll see you guys. Have a nice evening.
Thank you guys.